Welcome to our final installment of our 2026 webinar series. It's been a fun few months here of going through a number of different disease challenges and issues that we see in our small ruminant operations, and addressing some of those common questions that those of us in Extension have gotten over the last year or so. And so this is the last one. This evening, we're going to be covering biosecurity, some of those diseases of concern, and some of the tools we have to deal with them and minimize their occurrence on our operations. And so just a couple announcements as we get started here. Just be sure to keep yourself muted and your camera off for the duration of the presentations. We just want to make sure everyone's internet connections remain strong. When we get done with our presentations this evening, we will have some question and answer time. So feel free to type any questions in the chat. We'll come back and answer those at the end, or if you'd like to unmute yourself at the end of the presentations and ask your questions that way, you are more than welcome to do so. And so, like I said before, if you just joined us, please type in the chat where you're from. It's fun to see where everyone is joining us from this evening. This will be recorded, and the recording will be posted on YouTube and linked to our Small Ruminant Extension webpage, so you'll be able to access the recording at a future date. Before I get any further into tonight's program, I want to introduce Dalton Suits. He's the livestock agent down in Chatham County here in North Carolina. He's going to share just a couple words about the North Carolina Sheep Producers Association that we've been working with for this webinar series.
Yeah, so like Andrew said, we are partnered with the North Carolina Sheep Producers Association. I just wanted to share a little bit about them. They're kind of a community organization where people that raise sheep come together, and they hold an annual conference or annual event once a year, annual meeting. And they're always looking for other ways that they can be a service to the sheep community. So if you're interested, if you're a breeder or you raise sheep or you sell lamb, whatever you do, consider joining their membership. And if you've got things that you'd like to see them do, they're looking for ways to shape the organization to be a service more to the sheep community.
Awesome. Thanks, Dalton. If any of you have questions about the Sheep Producers Organization, please reach out to us. If you're not already a member, I encourage you to do so. And it's that organization will be the state affiliate of the national organization. So your membership goes towards being a national member as well. So great opportunity there. So with that, I'd like to introduce our main speaker for the evening, Dr. Chris Fletcher. Dr. Fletcher works for the Virginia Department of Agriculture and been a long time sheep producer as well, raising Katahdin sheep there in Southwest Virginia. I first got to know Dr. Fletcher probably 10 years ago or so now, maybe even a little bit more than that, working with the Virginia Tech Ram test there in Glade Spring, Virginia. And he was a practicing veterinarian in that region of the state for many years. And then I can't remember exactly when it was, a few years ago, moved over to the Department of Agriculture side of things. So he's going to share some thoughts, perspective on biosecurity, some diseases of concern. And then I'm going to wrap things up with a more genetics perspective on some of this disease management, and then we'll open it up for questions. So with that, I'll turn the floor over to you, Dr. Fletcher.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Weaver. Yeah, I appreciate everyone turning out for tonight. I guess, can you see my slides okay?
Yes, those look great.
Good. Okay. All right. So I apologize. I'm only on one screen here at the house. So if I miss something, just let me know. So but like I said, I appreciate all of you all taking time out of your busy schedule to listen to me rant and rave here. But like Dr. Weaver said, about 2.5 years, I guess, I've been with the Virginia Department of Agriculture. So kind of long enough to have been exposed to quite a bit. It's much different than my previous life. I say much different, not really, but so I was in private practice for 17 years, done a lot of small ruminant as a veterinarian. Done a lot of small ruminant medicine, so I have a little bit of experience there. And like Dr. Weaver said, we've got about 120 Katahdin ewes that we dabble with. So So tonight, Dr. Weaver, and I appreciate the invite. So he asked me to talk about biosecurity. So unfortunately, there's no way to get around it. This is a pretty dry, sometimes boring topic. However, hopefully I'll get this across to you that even though it may seem very minutia, that it's a very important topic, especially when it comes to protecting your flock from some of these diseases. So we'll kind of go through some basic things about biosecurity, some basic things about some diseases, and a lot of this information, before I forget to say it, comes from the Secure Sheep and Wool Supply. They've got a great website you can get on there, and it's really in-depth, good articles if you're interested in taking that further. So when we think about biosecurity, we think about someone coming to visit our farm. So you got this little guy, and he's walking, and he visits our farm. We'll talk to him. However, this biosecurity talk is to get you to think, what did he just leave behind? So everywhere he tracks with his boots, he's leaving bacteria, viruses, whatever, right through your pasture, onto your ground, left behind. So just because he leaves doesn't mean that everything he brought leaves also. So with biosecurity, and this has gotten even more so in the last 2 or 3 years, really you can divide producers into two camps. Either those that are all in on biosecurity and they go to the nth degree in keeping their farm protected at all cost and to all expense, or you've got the producers that are, for whatever reason, vehemently opposed to any sort of biosecurity talk at all. So, and that is sharply divided. Now, I will say, in practice, I saw this more with on the goat side. They're more in the all-in biosecurity as far as biosecurity screening test, especially for new animals, and for the sheep side. Now, that's not everyone, but generally speaking, the sheep producers kind of lag behind, and they're in kind of the zero biosecurity camp. Now, that's not to say that you won't find some producers that take it a little more serious, and don't be trying to decide which camp you're in. I would argue that there is some middle ground here that, practically speaking, that I can maybe urge you to maybe think about and maybe put into practice. So when we think about really life in general, but when we base that on the farm, what can we really control? You can control, of course, yourself. You can control what happens on your farm, and you can control what you bring or allow into and out of your farm. So what can't you control? Of course, we have no say on what another producer does. What they do is their own prerogative. Anything outside your castle here, you can't control. Even on your farm, you still have a hard time controlling wildlife. I mean, that's just going to happen unless you put up 10-foot high fence to keep the deer out. Those wildlife, whether it be, raccoons digging under the fence or coyotes digging under the fence, what have you, the wildlife will find a way to come and go. So really we have not a lot of control over that. Uh, and then the general overall industry consensus. I mentioned a lot of goat breeders. That industry has kind of, not everyone, but as maybe a whole, trying to shift more toward biosecurity, especially when it comes to screening tests. So I've already said it multiple times, but what is biosecurity? So I like pictures, so I'm kind of a simple person. So as I kind of alluded to, your farm is your castle. We spend hours upon hours improving and working the land, and we take pride in that. So that is kind of our little piece of heaven here on earth. So that is our castle. So when you encounter germs and diseases, so bacteria, virus, fungal, whatever, they have a tendency to want to invade, and that in turn, without biosecurity, uh, sorry, going ahead here, without biosecurity, comes directly into your farm. So biosecurity would be represented by this yellow circle, and then when bacteria viruses try to come in, unbeknownst to you, the biosecurity protocols that you put in place prevent those from entering into your flock or your goat herd. So that's the whole principle behind biosecurity. Uh, for biosecurity to work, unfortunately, it has to work 100% of the time. You can't be slack on it this time and say, "Well, I'll do it later." You may have just seeded your ground full of bacteria or whatever. For biosecurity to work, it needs to work 100% of the time. Uh, so, so for it to work, how do we mitigate the risk? So, what are the risks? Probably, to be honest, the biggest risk to your farm is purchased or borrowed animals. So by far, you're bringing what another producer, that kind of ecosystem, bacteria and viruses that are harbored on each of our farms, and you go to purchase or borrow an animal, you now bring those right in with it. Veterinarians, like I said, I'm one. We're usually in a hurry. Not that, I mean, we know about biosecurity. We've been taught biosecurity, but, to what we carry on our clothing and our boots, you probably wouldn't want to know. And it's a good chance that the call that we had before we get to your place was a sick animal. So we are around those bacteria and viruses all the time. So we are pretty high risk. The feed truck. A lot of people, think nothing about calling to order a load of feed. That feed truck rolling in. Of course, he has what you want, and need. However, you don't know where that truck has been, how many stops he or she has made in that day, and what those tires have driven through. Equipment, shared borrowed equipment. You bring that to a farm or bring it to your farm. You're bringing that fecal matter, snot that they rubbed on the squeeze chute right into your kingdom here. Visitors and I kind of break that up into high risk and low risk. So, another sheep producer or goat producer is a high risk visitor if you ask them to come to your farm, walk around your pastures. A person that lives in the city that just wants to bring their kids to see bottle lambs, and they have never, this is the first time they've ever been to a farm, they are very low risk visitors as far as biosecurity is concerned. Vehicles, yours included. Hopefully, you can kind of control yours a little more than others. But for example, at our place here, we've got about a half a mile driveway. However, some farms let the animals run across the driveway. So if your mailman or has went into a farm and drove through fecal matter, and then they come to your farm, you have the potential to spread diseases that way. Same thing with any kind of deliveries. Wildlife, of course, deer or ruminants and can spread certain diseases for sure. So they are always biosecurity risk. And then some of these diseases can be spread in semen and embryos also. So all those would be risk to your farm. So, in words, biosecurity refers to any measures that you take to prevent that introduction of those bacteria, viruses onto your farm. And including pests. So these are just practices and procedures. Like I said, hopefully I can make those practical for you to protect your property. By far, poultry and swine industries are, and some of you from North Carolina, you're in a lot of swine country in that region. So swine industries, poultry industries are miles and miles ahead of any other industry, livestock industry out there. A lot of these farms you shower in, shower out. You don't just drive into a swine facility without first going through a security checkpoint. It's that type of biosecurity, and that's why they do it. Is the biosecurity concerns, especially for poultry and avian influenza. They don't want a backyard producer bringing in mycoplasma or avian influenza. So they go to even the extent of changing clothes, showering in, wearing farm dedicated clothing. When you come out, you remove that farm clothing, shower out, put on your street clothes, and then back out. So they take it very seriously. More so than any other livestock industry. So here's what you would be faced with if you were just trying to pull into this is probably a swine facility here. Signage, gate, probably a locked gate, to be honest with you. Numbers that you can call if to tell them what you need. So, excuse me. So I told you about biosecurity, what that is, what that does, but so what? I mean, what does that mean for us that are in dealing with small ruminants? So. Fortunately, a whole lot. So these are just a few, and I'll run through a couple of these. But foot rot is probably one of the biggies. You do not want that. OPP for the sheep people, CAE on the goat side, caseous lamentitis, Yonis, all sorts of respiratory diseases here, ORF, even abortion diseases. All these diseases, some of them have vaccines, so on and so forth. However, you can prove, we've got the proof that you can input some biosecurity protocols and prevent a whole lot of this. So, think anything that you would consider a contagious disease, so a disease that would jump from animal to animal, that is what we're after to try to prevent. So that's on our animals, but just real quickly, biosecurity is not only for our animals but also our property. So what I call the bad parasites. So that would be the dewormer resistant parasites. We want to keep those off of our property as much as we can, because each of us have our own little colony of parasites. And the parasites we have, if we are doing FOMACHA and we strategically deworm and so on and so forth, we probably have very few drug resistant parasites on our farm. So the last thing we want to do is go buy an animal, bring it in, and it just sits there and pumps out, resistant parasites, and they multiply and spread on our property. And then we turn into having eventually a drug resistant issue with parasites. A lot of these bacteria viruses will stay in the environment here. The Corynebacterium pseudotuberculosis, which is the bacteria causes CL, I've saw papers that say that it can live in the environment for up to a year. So we don't want that on our property. Forages, just a side note, the upper right hand picture here. Hopefully you all don't have that wherever you're at, but here in Virginia, and I'm pretty sure North Carolina too, that's Johnson grass, very invasive species of weed. And then invasive insects. Thankfully, I've never seen any of these army worms, but they can definitely wreak havoc on a property as well. So anything, I would consider those definitely contagious and noxious. So we're trying to keep everything we can out. So I told you a few of the diseases. So how common is it? Why should I be worried about this? So I did find some papers from Washington Animal Disease Diagnostic Lab in Washington State. So they done kind of a retrospective study. They looked at over 6,000 samples. These samples were sent in from 28 different states. It is a combination of sheep and goats here. So surprisingly, I thought these would be a little bit higher, but CL was about 3% positivity rate. Yonis was about a 1% positivity rate in the samples that they looked at. OPP was looking at about a 5% positive rate. However, so that's one of the issues, and I was able to help with the 2024 NOMS study, which looked at the sheep production in the United States. And they, I don't know if they're going to do CL or Yonis, but they are testing those samples for OPP at least. So we may have a little bit better look at that here in the next, hopefully, few years. But I did find an APHIS study that showed the testing that they were looking at showed more of a 36% positivity rate for having at least one animal in their flock that's positive for OPP. So the literature I just kind of picked out this retrospective look at these samples, but you can see it's a real thing. Those numbers may not, jump out at you. However, that 36% definitely does for an OPP suspect. So a little bit on these diseases. Foot scald, in case you're not familiar with that, you have really no hoof involvement there. It involves the interdigital space. So, and I think let me back up here. So these sheep and goats will be lame. There's the bacteria. These bacteria are anaerobes, which means that they cannot survive in a high oxygen environment. Foot scald is not contagious. However, it might appear contagious because you've got so many animals and then new animals that are appearing lame. It's mainly related to the environment, usually wet, muddy environment that cause all sheep standing in the same environment, so they all come down with it pretty quickly. Treatment. Like I said, it's the environment. If you can change the environment, sometimes that's enough to take care of it. Foot baths, antibiotics on those cases that you can't control. Interdigital space is in between each claw of the foot. So jumping over to its kind of a kin foot rot here. So this one does involve the hoof wall and the sole. These sheep are lame like foot scald. It's caused by two different bacteria. The bacteroides, however, is a contagious bacteria, so they can have both at the same time. This is another one that can survive in the environment, especially hoof tissue. So if you're trimming hoofs, a good biosecurity practice is to clean up that hoof tissue because hopefully you don't, but if you do, that bacteria can live in there for 6 to 8 months inside that hoof tissue. Treatment, best thing to do is to isolate into two groups, the lame and the not lame. Zactran as an antibiotic works really well. Keep in mind that does have a 42-day meat withdrawal on that. So here's just some examples of true foot rot. As you can see, which you can't really see it, but the interdigital space sometimes will be affected also, but you can see it's jumped over into the hoof, the sole of the hoof and the hoof wall, and of course those are maggots, and it just destroys that hoof tissue, like I said, on the hoof. How to prevent foot rot. So not foot scald, but foot rot. Of course, biosecurity. You can easily transmit foot rot, the bacteria, on your shoes, your clothes, truck tires. Definitely, the previous slide said that animals can harbor this disease. So any new additions that you bring on your farm can potentially bring and spread the bacteria causes foot rot. I've heard as a veterinarian time and time again, I had to sell out of the sheep business. I went to the market, bought some a buck or a ram, brought it home. He had foot rot. Everybody got foot rot, so on and so forth. So which that a lot of these things, as you can imagine, is self-induced, self-inflicted. So if we kind of be cognizant of the things and practices that we do, hopefully we can head off some of these things. We'll put a plug in for Zenpro, even though I'm not a mineral salesman. That is just a high zinc level in the feed. Mineral, so that definitely will support your hoof health. Here, just an example, and I think I'll talk about that a little bit later, but boot covers, biosecurity is going to cost you a little bit. Boot covers by far are, in my opinion, a must, especially to prevent foot rot because it covers up what's on the bottom of that boot. CL, so caseous lymphadenitis, caused by Corynebacterium. So this disease actually sets up in the lymph nodes. So it can be internal lymph nodes or external lymph nodes. So this is one of those diseases that is zoonotic. So zoonotic means that you as a human can catch or contract a disease from an animal. So this Corynebacterium in these lymph nodes will have an abscess. If you rupture this abscess and it gets in a cut or heaven forbid in your mouth or something, you have the potential to contract this bacteria. So another one, well, I mentioned earlier, 8 months to a year, this can live in the soil. So this goat here with the X's, if you can see that, is your major external lymph node. So that's the most predominant areas that you'll see. The textbooks will say that goats are more prone to having these abscess lymph nodes external, so right under the skin, like here and here. And sheep are more prone to having internal lymph nodes abscess, so that would be, through the thorax and the abdominal cavity. However, in practice, I didn't see that. I saw as many external lymph nodes on sheep as I did goats. So. Most common is around the head. These lymph nodes will start to swell. They and then rupture eventually. Really thick cheese-like substance in these abscesses. Once they rupture, so these animals are not contagious as long as the abscess has not ruptured. However, once it ruptures, that's where you get environmental contamination and exposure to other animals and humans. So to diagnose this, you want to culture that abscess, blood work. So ELISA test detects antibodies. So that only tells you whether that animal has seroconverted it. You do get false negatives, or you even get what's labeled a suspect back from the lab. What does that mean? Nobody knows. It's just a suspect. Could have it, could not have it. So goat producers, there is a vaccine. So, but be cautious about using it. I know goat producers that vaccinate just to. Well, let me think how to say it. So, if you vaccinate your animals, everybody comes back positive on ELISA test. So, if you have a true positive, you don't know on the test whether that's a true positive or a positive from the vaccine. So you can't differentiate the two if you use this vaccine. And to be honest with you, it does not do a very good job at preventing. They'll still get CL. If you vaccinate them, expose them to CL, they'll still contract CL. So it's not really that great of a vaccine anyway. Personally, I would avoid vaccinating your animals in case you do ever need to test those animals, so you can truly know if you do have a positive, so that you can deal with that animal as needed. So I put this little goat kid here. You can see this kind of swelling. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but the swelling on the kind of the side of the jaw here. There is no lymph node there. So what I put that on there was to remind me to tell you that every swelling on an animal does not have to be CL. This is probably a bottle kid that probably bit the inside of his jaw or his cheek there, formed an abscess. The lymph nodes set more in this commissure of the back of the jaw here. So that's probably just a tooth bite abscess there. So if you see a swelling, don't get freaked out about it until it comes back from the lab by culture. Then you don't really know what you're dealing with. So treatment and prevention, biosecurity again. These animals, once they're infected by CL, they are infected for life and can have those recurring abscesses. If you lance that, make sure you catch that discharge or that abscess material keep that from falling on the ground, because like I said, that's what contaminates the environment. Antibiotics after that lymph nodes rupture, if you're planning on keeping that animal, and isolate until you get it healed up. Here you can see this sheep that's a healed abscess, could be from CL, and cull those. We would recommend culling out those animals. A new strategy for treating CL is to use Draxin 1 per 100, and either inject that directly into that abscess or give 2 doses at the same time, 1 sub-Q and then 1 into the abscess. And that can actually, so you're not curing the disease, the animal from the disease. However, this has been shown to keep that abscess from rupturing, therefore keeping it out of the environment. That is considered to be off-label, so just work with your veterinarian as far as that goes. Withdrawal time on Draxxin is 34 days for meat. Johne's disease. So this affects all ruminants. Here we go. Here with deer, I mentioned about wildlife. All ruminants can be affected by Johne's. There's the bacteria. This, like I said, is a contagious disease spread by fecal oral. This also can be transmitted across the placenta and through the milk and colostrum on these pregnancies. These animals get chronic weight loss. However, they'll eat like there's no tomorrow. Usually they'll have profuse diarrhea. However, that's more of common in cattle. Sheep and goats in reality, you don't really see a lot of diarrhea with Johne's disease in sheep and goats. However, they'll still drop weight like crazy, even though they're eating like I said. With a really good appetite. Some researchers have tried to link Johne's disease to Crohn's disease. Kind of does the same thing in humans. They've not found that link if that is there. So no treatment for Johne's disease. The testing here again is poor. You get a lot of false negatives and positives, but biosecurity by far is how you want to go about preventing this disease. No vaccine either. Ovine progressive pneumonia, OPP, caprine, arthritis, and encephalitis, CAE. On the goat side, this is caused by a virus. So this virus can be spread in all bodily fluids. So colostrum, blood, respiratory secretions, fecal matter, and even semen and embryos. So this kind of sounds kind of a little bit like Johne's disease. You get severe weight loss. However, they'll typically, not always, but typically have a respiratory component to that, plus or minus a mastitis or infection of that mammary gland. You can get arthritis. That's more what I've seen personally with CAE and the goats. Usually they get arthritis, and I've seen more of the neurological signs in the goats also. Sheep, more concerned about the pneumonia symptoms and then the mastitis. No treatment for this virus. There is a genetic test that you can test to determine an animal's resistance, but by far biosecurity is what you want to use to help prevent this from being on your farm. So, as far as prevention strategies go, you want to isolate sick animals or new arrivals. So, it's a good idea to dedicate an area, either a sick pen or a quarantine pen. Make sure that's away from your resident animals. Preferably that they can't have any nose-to-nose contact, and make that a dedicated space. Now, most of us are strapped for space anyway, especially barn space, but I would urge you to think about, creating a space that you can do that with. Purchased animals from, if you can, farms with good biosecurity. That's not a negative. If you find an animal that you really, really want and they don't do a lick of biosecurity, there's ways that we can go about doing that and safely with producers that are maybe lax on their biosecurity. I used to work at livestock market. Not, I mean, that they are part of our community, especially here where I live in Abington. However, they are very high risk. Usually, that's where the problems end up. I would think twice about buying something from a livestock market without some very stringent biosecurity protocols before entering back to your farm with that. Regular health checks by a veterinarian. I know veterinarians are hard to find. If you can find one, form that relationship with them to where you can pick up the phone and ask them questions. Hey, whatever it is, you know, how much of a risk is this? Whatever you're talking about doing or potentially going to do to bring back anything to your animals. Records, I can't stress that enough, because if you've got an issue and you're trying to think back from memory 2 weeks ago, well, what did that look like, or which animal had that? And but records, this animal had a sore foot on this day. This is where I thought it was coming from. Keep good records, especially if you have some sort of disease outbreak. You can kind of trace it back and maybe even pinpoint possibly where that came from. So, as far as sick animals, make sure you take care of the healthy, youngest animals first, and then save the sick animals toward the end of your chores, so that when you get done with them, you can come in, change clothes, put on new clothes before going back out. Like I said, communicate with your veterinarian. Proper vaccination. Some of these diseases, not all, but some, can definitely be, especially your respiratory diseases, can be prevented or helped by vaccination. I would urge you, any suspicious death that you might have, consider having a necropsy done on that. As I always say, one death, it may just be unlucky sheep business. Two might be a coincidence. You get to three, then there's issues. So definitely get those necropsied and see what they come back as, so that possibly you can put in some protocols to prevent others from dying. Uh, Limit shared equipment. I know things are tight and somebody's got a turntable and you're trimming feet. It's very tempting to go get that turntable. If you do, I mean, make sure you scrub it, disinfect it prior to bringing it, and then show your neighbors some courtesy and do it when you take it back also. Uh, this one here is a no-no. Don't use colostrum from other farms. I hear about a lot of people saying, "Well, I'm out of colostrum. I'll go down the road. He's got some frozen in the freezer, and get that and thaw it." Please don't do that. Like I said, OPP, CAE can be transmitted by that colostrum. Just if you're having issues, go find you some synthetic colostrum. These days, that works really well. If you're doing semen and embryos, make sure you purchase those from companies with good biosecurity protocols, and feed from reputable companies. One thing about feed that I forgot to mention, our feed truck. And this, not they don't do it for us, or didn't do this for us, but they do run feed to some poultry farms. And a lot of these poultry companies require, there's a picture of it, require them to have disinfectant to, these are tanks that carried on the truck. You've got a spray nozzle here that it's pumped to. As they're in transit, they will spray disinfectant on their tires, so that you're not transferring any contagious material from one place to the other. So our feed trucks have that, and use that quite frequently after running feed to a farm. So you might ask if your feed trucks, if you get it in bulk, does that or not. If they do, tell them to turn it on before they get to your place. Proper manure management comes in play. Carcass disposal. You got an animal that died. It died from something. You don't want to necessarily leave that animal, that carcass laying in the field to possibly transmit any diseases to other animals. Wash your hands frequently. Make sure you got on clean clothing, especially going out to see, take care of your animals, and even have farm dedicated clothing. When I was a private practitioner, the first thing I done when I got home, when I got out of the truck, was changed out of my boots into my farm dedicated boots so that I'm not bringing anything back home to my animals. Decrease your wild animal contact as much as possible. Clean up feed spills, whatnot. And again, records are important. Control public access. Just don't let anyone come in contact with your animals. Strategically think about your parking. Feed deliveries if you've got that option to move that around. Think, well, where has this person been before they got to my place? Signage works great. Don't borrow equipment if you don't have to. I talked about the bad parasites, so those drug-resistant parasites. Deworm new animals on arrival, or if you can, it'd be nice to do that prior to. Let those parasites dump out on the trailer or on the other person's property before picking them up. Signage, here we go. These days, it's kind of crucial to have that, those signs bilingual. Works really good. Again, another sign. These are all can be found. I'm pretty sure that the Secure sheep and wool supply has those. This one, as you can tell, came from the Secure milk supply. Each protein source has their own secure supply food group. So these signs can be found and printed off, laminated. Gates are not only keep animals in. With these images, if in practice when I was running farm to farm, if I saw this picture here on the left and I didn't see anybody, I would just drive right on up, look around the barn here. Gates, I'm pretty lazy. If I come up to a double gate that's open, unless I've got a vet student with me, I would sit there and make sure the producer is there ready for me before I climbed out of the truck to open up those gates. So gates, for those lazy people, keep the public, out at bay. You don't have to show up or have people show up at your farm looking like this biosecurity queen here. So gates, any kind of barriers, doesn't have to get real expensive. Bell and twine, if you want to keep people from parking somewhere to control that traffic flow. Farm dedicated clothing, that's kind of a biggie. Like I said, booties. These plastic booties, it is an expense, but just think if you got foot rot, had to sell out. So these are a minimal fee compared to throwing away your genetics and all your hard work. Uh, Disinfectant foot baths. So I'm talking about the human kind. This picture here on the right. This typically you can use Vicron. It comes in tablets. These have a zipper. You throw the tablet of that in there, wet it down, step on a few times. Will get kind of sudsy, so you can put shoes on there. Stand on that. This Vicron is a virucidal plus a bactericidal, so that does kill a lot of it. It kills foot and mouth disease, so it kills a whole lot of viruses and bacteria. It's hard to beat bleach, so bleach works great. Chlorhexidine also. Make sure you pressure wash vehicles. To keep that mud and fecal matter off of that. Make sure that if you're doing a boot wash, to have a brush to scrub those boots, especially the bottom where that mud and dirt will be caked in there. I mentioned secure food supply, the secure sheep and wool supply also. There's three goals to this. This is kind of what I do these days, but the goals are to detect, control, and contain any sort of foreign animal disease. So if you put the practices in place uh, that they list on their website, then this will help to control any sort of foreign animal disease, eradicate that foreign animal disease if found, and then facilitate your ability to keep on doing business. This is centered around FMD, so foot and mouth disease, which is a foreign animal disease. However, like I've been talking about, these biosecurity measures will protect you from the quote unquote common diseases that we have in the United States. If you get on this website, you'll see a list of enhanced biosecurity measures. So it takes what I just said to the nth degree. So if you're interested in that, you can contact me or check out that website. So, final thoughts here. The truth about it, you want to make every effort to prevent any sort of entry of diseases that you don't have on your farm. Like I said, biosecurity to do that needs to work 100% of the time. You can't be slack or make visitors wear booties this time, but not next time. You need to do it and be committed to it. Understand your limitations, but on those limitations, try to come up with some creative solutions, just like the booties, the plastic booties, the boot baths, boot wash stations. That's very simple thing to do, uh, but it does take effort. Uh, the issue with biosecurity is a lot of times you're trying to protect and fight against things that you can't see with your eyes. Just like the little guy on my second slide there walking across the ground, you don't see what that person is leaving behind. However, they are, unless you take some biosecurity interactions, leaving bacteria, viruses, dirt behind. Uh, like I mentioned earlier, kind of alluded to, don't be afraid to purchase animals from a non-biosecurity farm. There's a few more steps that you can do. There are tests, like I said, you can test animals for OPP, CL, Yonis, so on and so forth. The tests aren't that great, but you can test, depends on which disease you're talking about, but you can bring them in, quarantine them for 2 to 3 weeks, at least 21 days, to be honest. Get the blood test on them if you want to do that. But just because they may be a little lax on their biosecurity doesn't necessarily mean that you should not purchase animals from those folks. There's just a few more steps that you're going to have to take. If biosecurity is a concern for you. If you're in Virginia, we can definitely help with setting up a biosecurity plan for your farm. That's kind of one thing that I do. Remember, you're not going to be able to disinfect that for sure. So, with that, I don't know how you want to handle it, Andrew. We'll take questions and.
Yeah, and what I might do, I've got just a few slides to share on the genetics, some of the genetic testing that we have available for a couple of these, and so maybe I'll start sharing that, and then if anyone has questions for Dr. Fletcher, if you want to type them in the chat, we can start looking those over, and he can look those over, and then as soon as I get done, we'll just start answering questions from both presentations if that works.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. That was great. A very thorough presentation and really enjoyed that. Like I said, I'm going to just share a few thoughts on some of the genetic tools that we have available that we can use to breed animals to maybe be more resistant to some of the diseases that we may be faced with. And so we're going to call these genetic conditions because we're really testing for a variety of different genes, single genes that control potentially susceptibility to a disease or may impact individual animal productivity for a specific trait like fertility or muscularity. So these genetic conditions differ from some of those other traits that we're going to evaluate through more quantitative methods, like weaning weights, fecal egg counts. Those are what we call quantitative traits. We use estimated breeding values to evaluate those. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother presentation. For the sake of the slides here, the conditions that we're going to talk about this evening, these are controlled by just a single gene and relatively easy to test for. Testing is provided through a variety of different entities. Neogen provides this testing and partners with NSIP, the National Sheep Improvement Program, to provide some testing for sheep involved in that program. Gene Check is a common one that may be familiar to many of you, as well as Flock 54. And so some of these provide kind of an all-in-one package. You pay somewhere between $20, $30, $35, and you kind of get an all-inclusive test of multiple different genetic conditions, including diseases and animal productivity traits. And you get it, it's a little bit more expensive, but you get it all in one, right? And the cost per test is less. If you're just concerned about maybe a specific gene, maybe Scrapie or OPP, something like that, a specific gene that you want to test for, you can run those through some other specific entities. Those are a little bit cheaper. It's about $12 per gene per test. So if you're just concerned about one or two specific genes, that might be the cheaper option. So just want to mention what's available out there, how we weight these and utilize these in our breeding objective. So the selection decisions that we're going to make, the traits we're going to prioritize will vary. Some people are going to put a lot of emphasis on these, the outcomes of these genetic conditions testing. Others are going to place more emphasis, more weight in other places. And some are going to balance those two things together. So that's for you to decide. But I'm not going to stand here and say that you need to go all one way or all another. So it's just one of the tools in our toolbox. The first disease I want to talk about is Scrapie, and I know this isn't one that maybe has the same, it's not contagious like the ones that Dr. Fletcher talked about just a minute ago, but it is a disease that our industry has has invested a significant amount of money in and time in trying to eradicate, and will open up a significant international market once it's eradicated. This is a degenerative neurologic disease. There's no treatment that is eventually fatal to these animals that contract it. The challenge with Scrapie is that it's transmitted around birth, but they don't show symptoms till they're 2 to 5 years old. And so by the time they show symptoms, we got to figure out where that animal was born and then be able to trace it back that way. And so that's why you're probably familiar with Scrapie tags and flock ID numbers and that whole traceability program that's been in place for about 25, a little over 25 years now. And that's done a tremendous job of helping us to eradicate Scrapie. But one of the other tools we have is genetics, right? So we have animals, and we have animals that possess certain genes that allow them to be more resistant or completely resistant to developing Scrapie. And other animals may have genes that cause them to be susceptible to developing Scrapie should they be exposed to the infectious agent, that prion protein. And so we have two genes, two codons, two segments of DNA that code for specific proteins that may result in that animal being resistant or susceptible. And so we have codon 136 and codon 171 are the two that we talk about the most. Codon 171 is probably the most common one, the largest determining factor in whether that animal is resistant or susceptible. But to break these down, and the table kind of outlines that those AAs at codon 136 and RRs at 171 designate an animal that's completely resistant to developing Scrapie. So that's the most favorable genotype. That would be ideal, right? And these are sheep-specific codons. So I'm going to talk about goats here in just a minute. We also have that QR genotype at codon 171. If that QR at 171 is paired with an AA genotype at codon 136, those individuals are rarely susceptible. They're primarily pretty much resistant, far less susceptible. The AV genotype at 136 paired with the QR genotype at 171 would be somewhat susceptible individuals. So really for QR individual to get scrapie, it really needs to be paired with a V in that codon 136. And so those A's and V's, the Q's and R's, they code for amino acids. So, but you can think about those letters just designating what that genotype would be for at that specific gene related to scrapie resistance or susceptibility. The VVs are associated with susceptibility, and then QQs are associated with susceptibility. So when we pair up VV genotype at 136 with a QQ genotype at 171, we get those susceptible individuals. And one thing to note, that if they are QQ at codon 171, they are susceptible to scrapie regardless of what that 136 status is. So that's what we're really trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid those individuals that are QQ at 170 at codon 171, because those animals, they're not necessarily going to get scrapie, but they could if they were exposed to the infectious agent. Some work that's been done as part of the Sheep GEMS project, led by Dr. Lewis and many others, looked at the distribution of these genes across 4 major breeds, the Katahdin, Polypay, Rambouillet, and Suffolk. And so you can see the distribution of those different genotypes. The AARRs would be the predominant across all 4 major breeds. So that's a favorable thing, right? The majority of the breed of those 4 major breeds has the genotype associated with resistance to this disease. We see a decent proportion of individuals that are AAQR, which are, somewhat susceptible, but mostly resistant. We do have a few individuals, especially in the Katahdin breed and the Rambouillet breed, that have that VVQQ genotype designated by the red bar, and a higher proportion of the population has that susceptible genotype. So that's something we need to be aware of and probably work to remove those individuals from the population, breed those individuals out of the population. So how can we use genetics to breed those individuals out of the population? Well, you might remember Punnett squares from high school biology, right? So we can use this simple tool to allow us to evaluate what the possible genotypes are from matings of individuals with known genotypes. And so if we have 2 heterozygote individuals, this would just be codon 171. They have a Q and an R. And so we made a RAM that's Q and R. He's going to pass. We can just create a box with 4 quadrants, carry the Q's down on one side, the R's down on the other side, that RAM would pass on. He's going to either pass on a Q or pass on an R. And we can pair that up with a U that's also QR. So she's going to pass on a Q or an R. And so you just carry her alleles across. And so if you look at the possible genotypes of these offspring, then highlighted in blue would be those individuals that would be resistant to developing scrapie. So 75% of the potential offspring would be resistant. What's highlighted in red would be the susceptible population, 25% would be susceptible. Of those resistant individuals, 2/3 are carriers. So they could pass on a Q allele, but they themselves are pretty much resistant. If we made an RR RAM to a QRU, he's guaranteed to give an R to everybody, right? So regardless of what the U passes on, everybody's getting an R because the RAM is RR, is homozygous resistant. In this case, pretty much everybody is resistant, 0% susceptible, 0% are QQ. And so that's a very favorable thing, right? So this is the benefit of using an RR RAM, is that you're guaranteeing that all of those offspring possess an R allele and are able to, should be relatively mostly resistant to developing scrapie. And even if we have a QQ U in our population, we might not know that, right? We might not have tested our U's, but if we know the genotype on the RAM, we know that the RAM is RR, we know that he's passing an R allele to every offspring, and we're guaranteeing that every offspring is mostly resistant. So that's a very favorable thing. I mentioned goats. So goats, different codons on goats. And so what I just talked about was very sheep specific. Scrapie susceptibility on the goat side of things. We have a few more letters involved. We have 2 primary codons. So we have codon 146 and codon 222. And so at codon 146, we have 3 possible we're just going to use letters to designate the amino acids that those codons code for. And so the N would code for an amino acid that's susceptible, that is associated with susceptibility to scrapie. S's and D's are code for amino acids associated with less susceptibility to scrapie. At codon 222, we have Q's and K's. The Q codes for amino acids associated with susceptibility to scrapie. The K's are associated with less susceptibility to scrapie. And so really we're looking for goats at these 2 codons to either have S's, D's, or K's would be ideal. So this test hasn't been around as long as the sheep test has been around, not utilized as frequently. The testing can be done through the UC Davis Veterinary Genetics Laboratory. It's a bit more expensive than the test we have available for sheep, but more information about this test can be found at the link provided at UC Davis Veterinary Genetics Laboratory website. Just one thing to note, I shared some statistics on demographics on the sheep side of things. On the goat side of things, there was a USDA study that looked at the percentage of operations that had genotypes for 146 and 222, and what those genotypes were relative to susceptibility to scrapie. These data represent about 650 operations and about 6,000 goats. And about just shy of 73% of all operations had one or more goats in that herd that had a resistant genotype at codon 222 or 146. So that's a very favorable thing. If this is indicative, representative of the rest of the goat population, we should have a number of animals out there and a number of farms out there that possess animals that have these resistant genotypes and should not or be less likely to develop scrapie. So that's a very favorable thing when we think about eradicating this disease long term. If we can just breed them, use genetics to make them more resistant, then sure, the tagging is still important traceability step, but genetics can just ensure it's kind of an insurance policy for preventing this disease. OPP, ovine progressive pneumonia. Dr. Fletcher talked about this one. We have a gene that controls susceptibility to this disease. And so TMEM154, this disease, and Dr. Fletcher talked about all the clinical signs associated with it, so I'm not going to spend any more time there. But the cool thing is we have genotypes associated with increased or decreased susceptibility. And so here we use numbers. And so we have 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. 1s and 4s are good. 1s and 4s represent individuals that are less susceptible to developing OPP. 2s and 3s are bad. So if they have a 2 or a 3, regardless of what it's paired with, if they have a 2 or 3, they are highly susceptible. And so we really want to focus in on those individuals that have 1s and 4s and only 1s and 4s and do not have 2s and 3s in that genotype at TMEM154. So genetics, again, and in this disease, we don't really have a genotype for complete resistance. We really have a genotype and genotypes for either less susceptibility or more susceptibility. So obviously less susceptibility is a more favorable genotype to possess. So 1s and 4s at TMEM154. The distribution of these genotypes across those 4 major breeds from that Sheep Gems project, you see that in Katahdins and Suffolks, there's a lot more individuals that have that high susceptibility genotype as compared to our Polypays and Rambouillets, where we have a lot greater proportion of those individuals that possess those 1s and 4s, that less susceptible genotype. Why is this? There's some thoughts, some theories about why we see this change in proportion of these genotypes. One thought is, especially Katahdin sheep, a lot of Katahdin sheep are raised out on pasture. They're not in confinement. They're not in close proximity with one another. The chance of spread of this disease is relatively small in those extensive Katahdin grass-based operations. And so there hasn't really been a lot of selection pressure against the disease because there just hasn't needed to be, right? Polypays are predominantly raised in confinement. So we have a lot of sheep in close proximity to one another. The opportunity for spread of this virus is very high. And if we don't have sheep that are less susceptible to the disease, it could have severe impacts on our operations. So there's been a lot more emphasis in that Polypay breed and towards selecting individuals with that lower susceptibility and getting this disease eradicated from those operations. And so that's just one theory about why that proportion changes. Certainly, I think in all breeds, it's not going to hurt anything to select those individuals that are 1s and 4s and are less susceptible to developing OPP. The next few I'm going to mention aren't necessarily disease related, but I just wanted to mention them real quick because we do have genetics condition testing for them. These relate more to animal productivity traits. And so we have myostatin. This gene controls muscle development. So mutations are going to result in an increase in muscle fiber number. And the mutation is additive. So you get 1 copy adds a little bit of muscle, 2 copies of that mutation adds a lot more muscle, right? Meat quality is not affected, which is the cool thing. We get more muscle mass, higher dressing percentage, more red meat yield. and yet we have still a very favorable eating experience. And this mutation really relates back to Texel sheep that carry the copies, the both copies of that myostatin mutation, and have that extreme muscling that they can then pass on to that offspring. They can, they're pretty much guaranteed to pass on at least one copy of the myostatin mutation to their offspring. And so when we test for these mutations, it either comes back as a non-carrier, no copies of the mutation, carrier with one copy of the mutation, or homozygous myostatin, both copies of the mutation. Obviously, those homozygous myostatin individuals are guaranteed to pass on a copy of that mutation to the offspring, automatically resulting in greater muscularity in that next generation. That's why Texels work so well as terminal sires on sheep to increase muscularity in that next generation. So just the frequency of those myostatin genotypes across the 4 major breeds, really non-existent in polypase and Rambouillets, as we would expect. Kind of interesting, we do have some carriers in the Katahdin population, as well as the Suffolk population, and that may indicate maybe some potential crossbreeding, outcrosses that were brought into those breeds. The Katahdin has an open herd book, and so we can bring in Texel genetics into the Katahdin breed, grade those sheep back up Katahdin, and have that increased muscularity and utilize that myostatin gene to help improve muscularity and carcass quality in our Katahdin sheep. And based on these data, there are some breeders that are actively doing that, and we see that myostatin mutation show up in some of our Katahdin sheep. And it appears the same thing has been happening in the Suffolk to some extent as well. Callipege, kind of an interesting name on this one. It's Greek for beautiful buttocks, and essentially it increases muscularity in the hind saddle, the rear portion of that animal. Codes for that mutation, codes for extreme muscle development. This one's associated with hypertrophy, so an increase in muscle fiber size, diameter, and this has significant negative effects on meat quality. We do not want callipege. Callipege is a bad thing. While visually it looks like that animal is a lot heavier muscled, the eating experience associated with that is very poor. So we do not want callipege. We want to breed this out of our population. A very interesting mode of inheritance, we call it paternal polar overdominance, simply means that the callipege is only shown in the heterozygote individual where the C comes from the sire. And so here, when you test for this gene, we have non-carriers, again, carriers or homozygous individuals with both copies of that callipege mutation. And lastly, the Barola mutation or gene, I should say. This influences ovulation rate, litter size, originated in the merino, the Barilla merino. The effects are additive, so each copy of this gene is associated with an increase in 1.6 CL or corpus luteum per cycle, which means they essentially ovulated 1.6 more eggs per cycle. So it's a gene that we can utilize to increase prolificacy and litter size. How much prolificacy do we want? If we already have a 200% lamb crop, we probably don't need to put any more emphasis on it, right? But if maybe litter size needs to be improved, could be potentially something to explore, although we don't see it utilized in a lot of operations around the country. So again, the testing on this, very similar results to what we talked about with the last two, carriers or homozygous for this Barilla gene. So just to kind of wrap things up and my final thoughts here, use genetics to control what can be controlled. It's a tool we have in our toolbox. It's not the end-all be-all, and we certainly need to combine genetics with some of the biosecurity practices that Dr. Fletcher talked about. We can use, some of the testing that he mentioned and test for those seropositive individuals for these different diseases and apply culling practices to remove those individuals from the flock. Do we need to test everything for everything? Maybe we do, maybe we don't, right? He talked about where we're purchasing breeding stock from. If we're getting it from an unknown source, maybe it's worth testing. If it's from a known source, maybe we don't have to test everything necessarily. So determine for your own operation what extent of testing you want to do and what's economically practical for your own operation. Genotyping strategies are also going to vary, right? Are we going to test everything for everything, genotype everything, or do we just test certain individuals? Maybe we just test the males. Maybe we just test those breeding rams that are going to contribute to that next generation. We can combine these genotypes, these genetic conditions, with the breeding values we have for a number of different traits. And I just propose some hypothetical examples, but these are up for you to decide, right? Well, how are we going to weight the genetic conditions results with the breeding values and those other genetic information that we have at our fingertips to determine which animals we're going to use in our breeding program. So determine what those flock goals are, to develop relevant breeding objectives accordingly, and just keep in mind that the more things you select for, the less progress you make in any one of those things. And so if we try to select for everything, we're not really going to make much progress in anything. Be strategic, select for those things that matter to your operation, make progress in those, and then once you've accomplished your goals for those specific specific traits, then maybe look at what's the next best thing that we can go after. So with that, and I've seen some things coming in the chat, so I will we'll open it up for questions, and whether it's on Dr. Fletcher's material or this, I'm happy to answer anything. I'm going to stop sharing just so we can see everybody. So I see Dr. Fletcher's typed some answers in the chat. Is there anything else? Is there anything you want to share, Dr. Fletcher, verbally?
As far as disinfectant go, just read the label. The label will give you, of course, the directions, but also give you a list of bacteria, viruses that those products would be effective against. I mentioned Virkon. Virkon is we use it with the Department of Agriculture because it does control tuberculosis, which I've been told if it kills tuberculosis, it'll kill about anything. But it does work against avian influenza and several other viruses. So that's a really good one to have. That really gets a whole lot of different variation of bacteria and viruses. Like I said, Clorox would work as well. It's been around forever, still works, and that's why.
Awesome. I see there's a question about Texel terminal sires in populations of sheep with maybe a little bit more fat. Will the increase in muscle mass affect the fat profile? So it will to a slight extent. There is some research that was done, and along with that improvement in muscle mass, we see a reduction in fat by about 10%. And so overall, the animal is higher cutability. We will lose some of that fat, but it's not a significant amount. So you get that increased muscle mass, you lose a little bit of fat. If you already have a U-base that's relatively easy fleshing and relatively fat, the reduction in fat that you're going to see with a terminal cross on a Texel probably won't significantly impact that eating experience or the meat quality. And then there's a question about what methods of genetic testing are there? Tissue samples, blood, hair. So the answer is all of the above. And so just check with the lab you're going to send it to and see what their preferred method is. But most will accept all three of those options. The popular one now is what we call tissue sampling units. You simply use it's very similar to like an ear tagger, and you punch a hole in their ear. It goes into a little vial that has a preservative in it. It's shelf stable. And so the nice thing is you can store it at room temperature until you're able to take it to the post office and send it, which is really handy. And so that system works well, and we're seeing more and more folks use those tissue sampling units. You can still use blood. That blood can be collected, and we can send a whole blood tube to that lab. Use a purple top tube, collect that whole blood sample that needs to be kept chilled on ice and overnighted to the lab. And so there's some shipping challenges with that. So just be mindful of the blood sample. You can use blood cards. And so you can take that whole blood sample and then inject some of that blood, put a drop on a card, and essentially that card acts like a preservative and preserves that sample. And that blood card is shelf stable and can be sent to the lab. That can work as well. You can also send in a hair sample. Make sure when you pull that hair sample that there is the base of that hair, the follicle is still attached. That's where the DNA is at. If you just pull hair alone, you're not going to get anything. It's got to have that root still attached to it. And so that can be utilized as well. So just, again, check with the lab, make sure they can accept whatever form you're planning to collect, and adjust accordingly. There's a question about any lab recommendations for the testing. Is that for the genetic testing or for the disease testing?
Genetics.
So I don't really endorse or promote one or another. They're all viable options. The ones I mentioned, gene check, will do, if you're just curious about specific genes for, a specific trait or two, they can do it. You just mark which genes you want them to test, and they'll test that animal for those specific ones. Neogen provides kind of an all-inclusive test. Flock 54 kind of provides an all-inclusive test as well for 4 to 6 different genes. And those are going to cost somewhere in that $20 to $35 range. So they're all viable options. If you want more information, contact information, submission information, just shoot me an email and I can get you that. There was a question, and I think this one's probably more oriented at Dr. Fletcher, but small hobby farm with wool sheep, what precautions should the shearers be taking?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question, and that like I said, anyone that comes to your farm has the potential to be carrying diseases, whether bacteria, virus. Of course, shears would be, cutting animals accidentally, so you would have blood contaminants. Also, a biggie on shears would be CL disease. So they would be, as they were shearing, if an abscess had been ruptured or they catch an abscess with the clippers, that would be spread on their equipment. So not to say, be scared out of your mind to never call shears again, but just if ask them to, go ahead and have your disinfectant there. Ask them if they would mind, or they may do it preemptively between farms, but ask them if they wouldn't mind, disinfecting their equipment with your disinfectant that you have. Run those clippers, take them apart, soak those blades in some disinfectant. And contact time, again, follow label instructions, but contact time, it should tell you how long to leave whatever in the solution. So that any halters that they might have, or another thing, if you want to go to the extreme, buy your own clippers. Say, hey, I just want you to come shear these sheep. I've got the clippers, I've got halters, whatever you need. We'll use my equipment. That's another way to do that. I know clippers are expensive, so just you have to do what you have to do, but there are ways to mitigate those situations. So I seen the other question there about bleach. Bleach is fine. I mean, the concentration, I don't have that in front of me or on top of my head, but I think it is, I want to say, like it's 2 tablespoons to a quart of water. Is that correct? I'm sure Google will have that just to look it up for disinfection of virus and bacteria. They'll have a simple solution, but that seems to be right. I may be wrong about that. I'll look that up and put it on my slides. There are questions about the slides. I'll get those to you to share those with everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Fletcher.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Give it just another minute here for questions, and then we'll call it an evening. Would appreciate everyone joining us. I know the days are getting longer, and we're starting these webinars while it's still light outside, which is always a challenge to get inside on a nice evening and join. So we certainly appreciate everyone making the time to join us and be a part of this. Like I said, this webinar, along with all of our past webinars, will be available on our Small Ruminant Extension website and our YouTube channel. And so if you missed one of the previous webinars, you can go and look for those. We can get you the links there, and we'll have these resources along with our webinar recordings from the last 3 or 4 years are available. So really a cool set of educational resources that we have now over the last several years of webinar series. And so great resource. If you haven't already looked through those or joined us for those, certainly encourage you to do that. So I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. So I think we're going to call it an evening. Certainly, if you think of anything after we leave this evening, my contact information was there on the last slide. I can be found on the North Carolina State Extension website as well, a Google search. Should bring up my contact information. I can get Dr. Fletcher's information as well to you. And he shared it in the chat as well, his email. So we certainly appreciate Dr. Fletcher joining us this evening and taking time out of his busy schedule to share some great information on biosecurity. So thank you so much for being willing to do that. Have a great rest of your evening, everyone. And we'll see you hopefully at another event later this year.
Thank you.